Have you ever stood on the precipice of perfect happiness, so close you could taste it, only to have the ground crumble beneath your feet? What do you do when the person you trust most in the world hands you the shovel, smiling as they watch you fall? For Chloe, that moment didn't come with a thunderous crash or a dramatic revelation in a crowded room. It came quietly, on a Tuesday afternoon, under the fluorescent lights of a bakery, with the scent of sugar and vanilla hanging heavy in the air. The day was bright, one of those impossibly golden autumn afternoons where the world seemed to be conspiring in her favor. In 3 days, she was getting married to Liam, the man who had painted color back into her world after years of feeling like a faded sketch. She was on her way to pick up their wedding cake, a task that felt like the final, perfect puzzle piece clicking into place. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a drumbeat of pure, unadulterated joy. She had always felt like she was living in the shadow of her older sister, Isabella. Isabella was the sun, dazzling, effortless, the person everyone orbited around. Chloe was the quiet moon, content to reflect a little of that light. But with Liam, she felt like she was finally generating her own. He saw her, truly saw her, and for the first time, she felt like the main character in her own life. Isabella had, of course, been instrumental in the wedding planning, a whirlwind of opinions and perfectly executed tasks. "Leave it to me," she'd said about the cake, waving a dismissive but reassuring hand. "You have enough to worry about. I'll handle the details with the baker." Chloe had been flooded with gratitude. It was just like Isabella, to take charge, to make things perfect. She pulled up to Harrison's Confections, a charming brick-fronted shop with whimsical frosting designs painted on the windows. A little bell chimed as she entered, announcing her arrival into a haven of warmth and sweetness. Behind the counter, a man with a flour-dusted apron and a harried expression was meticulously placing sugar flowers on a cupcake. This was Mr. Harrison, a local legend whose creations were edible art. He was known for being a bit of a perfectionist, a gruff artist who spoke the language of buttercream and fondant. Chloe approached the counter, her smile so wide it made her cheeks ache. She felt a lightness she had never known, a sense of belonging that was as sweet as the air she was breathing. This was it. The final step before her forever. She was picking up the symbol of her new life, a sweet testament to a love she believed was true. Chloe's hands smoothed down the front of her dress, a nervous but happy habit. "Hi," she began, her voice bubbling with excitement. "I'm here to pick up a wedding cake." For the wedding of Chloe and Liam, the young cashier behind the counter offered a polite smile and started rifling through a stack of order forms on a clipboard. She seemed new, her movements hesitant. After a moment of fruitless searching, she looked up, her brow furrowed in confusion. "I'm sorry, I don't seem to have a Chloe and Liam for this weekend." A tiny sliver of unease pierced Chloe's bubble of joy, but she quickly dismissed it. A simple mistake. "Oh, maybe it's under just Liam," she suggested helpfully. Mr. Harrison, overhearing the exchange, let out an impatient sigh and wiped his hands on his apron. "New girl," he muttered, not unkindly, as he strode over. "What's the name?" Chloe repeated it. "Chloe and Liam. The wedding is on Saturday. It's a 3-tier, lemon and elderflower cake with white buttercream." Mr. Harrison's eyes scanned the order sheets, his finger tracing down the list. He stopped, his finger tapping a single page. Here it is," he said, his voice laced with the satisfaction of solving a problem. 3-tier, lemon and elderflower, Saturday delivery." He pulled the slip from the clipboard. "Everything is on schedule. We're just adding the final decorations now." Relief washed over Chloe, warm and immediate. She laughed, a little puff of air. "Oh, thank goodness." For a second there, her voice trailed off as she saw Mr. Harrison's expression shift. He was staring at the paper, a deep line forming between his brows. He looked from the paper up to her, then back down again. "For the wedding of," he read slowly, his voice suddenly flat, "Liam." He paused, and in that tiny silence, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. The sweet smell of the bakery suddenly felt cloying, suffocating. Chloe's smile faltered. She waited for him to say her name, to complete the perfect picture. But he didn't. He cleared his throat, his gaze still fixed on the order slip as if it were written in a foreign language he couldn't quite decipher. Then, with a tone of utter bewilderment, he finished the sentence. And Isabella, the name hung in the air, an impossible, discordant note in the symphony of her happiness. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face. The cheerful bakery, the beautiful cakes in their glass cases, the warm sunlight slanting through the window, it all receded, becoming a blurry, distant backdrop to the roaring in her ears. A wave of dizziness washed over Chloe. "No," she said, her voice a faint whisper that was swallowed by the hum of the refrigerators. She tried again, forcing strength into her words. "No, that's a mistake. My name is Chloe." "The bride is Chloe." Mr. Harrison looked up from the slip, his expression a mixture of professional annoyance and burgeoning concern. He was a man who dealt in precision. Mistakes on his order forms were like cracks in a foundation. "Ma'am, the order form is very clear," he stated, holding it out for her to see. And there it was, printed in the stark, undeniable clarity of black ink on white paper. The details were all horrifyingly correct. The flavor profile she and Liam had spent an entire evening debating, the delicate vine pattern they had sketched together on a napkin, the Saturday date. But where her name should have been, nestled right next to Liam's, was a name that felt like a dagger. Isabella. Chloe's mind raced, scrambling for a rational explanation. A typo. A clerical error. A bizarre, cosmic mix-up that could be easily fixed with a pen stroke. "My sister, Isabella, she's the maid of honor. She placed the order for me." She must have gotten confused, Chloe stammered, the excuse sounding flimsy even to her own ears. But Mr. Harrison wasn't looking at the printed names anymore. He was pointing to the bottom of the form, at the signature line and the section for payment details. "The order was placed and the 50% deposit was paid by Isabella," he said, his voice softening slightly as he took in her pale, shocked face. "This is her signature, correct?" Chloe leaned closer, her eyes tracing the elegant, confident loops of the handwriting. It was Isabella's, without a doubt. The same perfect script that had adorned every birthday card, every shared note, every passive-aggressive post-it of their lives. And next to it, the credit card information. Her sister's credit card. The truth landed not like a gentle realization, but like a physical blow. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate, calculated erasure. She had been replaced. Mr. Harrison, the gruff baker, saw the change in her. He saw the flicker of desperate hope in her eyes extinguish, replaced by a deep, hollow chasm of pain. The annoyance vanished from his face, replaced by a quiet, human empathy. He was no longer a businessman dealing with a difficult order. He was a witness to a moment of profound heartbreak. He gently retracted the order form, as if hiding a weapon. "Why don't you have a seat for a moment?" he suggested, his voice now unexpectedly kind. But Chloe couldn't move. She could only stare at the spot where the paper had been. The ghost of her sister's name burned into her retinas. Chloe stumbled out of the bakery, the cheerful chime of the bell mocking her as she pushed through the door. The bright autumn sun felt accusatory, too brilliant for the darkness that had just enveloped her world. She sank onto a cold, wrought iron bench on the sidewalk, her body trembling uncontrollably. Her purse slipped from her grasp, spilling its contents onto the concrete. Lipstick, keys, a small photo of her and Liam smiling. She stared at the photo, at the man she was supposed to marry, his arm wrapped around her, and felt nothing but a cold, sickening dread. Her fingers, clumsy and shaking, fumbled for her phone. She had to hear it from her. She had to hear the lie, or the truth, or whatever monstrous explanation Isabella had concocted. She pressed the speed dial for her sister, and the phone rang, each tone a hammer blow to her fractured heart. Isabella answered on the second ring, her voice a song of syrupy sweetness. "Chloe, darling, don't tell me, you're at the bakery, aren't you? Is the cake as magnificent as we planned?" The casual, conspiratorial tone was a knife twist. Chloe squeezed her eyes shut, a single tear escaping and tracing a hot path down her cold cheek. "Isabella," she said, her own voice sounding foreign and strained. "I'm here." At the bakery. They showed me the order form. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. It was just a second, but it was long enough. It was the sound of a mask being adjusted. "Oh, that," Isabella said, her tone shifting, becoming airy and dismissive. "Don't be so dramatic. It was just easier for the paperwork that way. You know how you get with details." I put my name on it to make sure everything was handled properly. I paid the deposit. After all, the lie was so blatant, so insulting in its simplicity, that it momentarily stunned Chloe into silence. "Easier?" she finally choked out. "You put your name next to Liam's. On my wedding cake, Isabella." "Why would you do that?" The saccharine sweetness in Isabella's voice evaporated completely, replaced by a chilling coldness. "Honestly, Chloe," she sighed, as if explaining something to a particularly slow child. "Are you really this naive?" "Liam and it's been happening for months. We just make more sense. Everyone thinks so. This little fairy tale wedding of yours was sweet, but it was just a fantasy. It's always been me he wanted." The cruelty was breathtaking. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a vivisection of Chloe's entire reality. "He was going to tell you," Isabella continued, her voice devoid of any emotion. "After the wedding. He didn't want to hurt you." The phone slipped from Chloe's hand and clattered onto the pavement. The call was disconnected, but Isabella's words echoed in her head, a venomous chorus of deceit. She curled forward on the bench, a guttural sob tearing from her throat, the kind of raw, animal sound of a soul being ripped in two. She was alone on a sunny street, her world in ashes around her. From behind the pristine glass of a shop window, Mr. Harrison watched the scene unfold. He saw Chloe collapse onto the bench, saw the phone fall from her hand, saw her body convulse with sobs. He was a baker, a man who built his life around celebrations, birthdays, anniversaries, weddings. He crafted sweetness and joy from flour and sugar. But what he was witnessing now was the antithesis of his life's work. It was a bitterness so profound it seemed to sour the very air. He had seen bridezillas, frantic mothers, and last-minute panics. But this was different. This was a quiet demolition of a human heart, executed with cold precision. He untied his apron, a decisive gesture, and walked to the door. He didn't hesitate. He filled a glass with cold water from the cooler and picked up a small, perfectly formed almond croissant from the display case, placing it on a napkin. He stepped out into the afternoon light and approached the shaking figure on the bench. He didn't say anything at first, just set the water and the pastry down beside her. He took a seat at the other end of the bench, leaving a respectful distance, and simply stared ahead at the passing traffic. The silence was more comforting than any platitude could have been. After a few long moments, Chloe's sobs subsided into ragged, shuddering breaths. She finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. Mr. Harrison turned his gaze to her, his expression serious, but kind. "Some people," he said, his voice a low rumble, "try to build their happiness on the ruins of others. It's a fool's errand. A foundation like that will always crumble." He wasn't just a baker. He was a man who understood foundations. He paused, then gestured back toward his shop. "That cake in there, it's a beautiful cake. It's meant to celebrate a vow. A real one. A promise of love and respect." Not that. He nodded toward her phone, lying on the ground. He had pieced together the ugly truth from her side of the conversation. He then looked at the spilled contents of her purse, his eyes landing on the napkin sketch she must have dropped. It showed the cake design, but with more intricate details than Isabella had ever described. Little flourishes, a delicate pattern of climbing vines that was both unique and technically challenging. He picked it up. "Did you draw this?" he asked, his voice holding a new note of professional curiosity. Chloe nodded mutely. "It's good," he said, a simple, declarative statement. "You have an eye for structure and flow." Real artistry in that moment. He saw past the jilted bride. He saw the hidden gem, the overlooked virtuoso. He saw the talent that her own sister had tried to claim as her own. A new emotion began to stir in Chloe's chest, pushing through the thick fog of grief. It was a cold, hard anger. An anger at being underestimated, at being played for a fool, at being treated as an inconvenient afterthought in her own life story. The tears stopped. Her breathing evened out. She sat up straighter, the slump of the victim disappearing from her shoulders. She looked at Mr. Harrison, the kind stranger who had shown her more decency in 10 minutes than her sister had in a lifetime. Then she looked at the bakery, at the symbol of what was meant to be her joy, now twisted into a monument of her humiliation. A fierce, protective fire ignited within her. They would not get that cake. They would not get to celebrate their treachery with a confection born from her dreams. Their victory would not be so sweet. "They are not getting that cake," she said, and the voice that emerged was not the timid whisper of the girl who entered the shop. It was clear, firm, and resonant with newfound conviction. "They will not cut that cake together. They will not have that celebration." Her gaze was intense. She turned fully to Mr. Harrison, a plan forming in the wreckage of her heart. "How much?" she asked. "How much to buy the cake outright?" "I'll pay you the balance right now." All of it. Mr. Harrison was taken aback, not by the request, but by the sudden, powerful transformation he was witnessing. The heartbroken girl was gone, replaced by a woman claiming her power. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. He admired her spirit. He recognized the steel that had just been forged in the fire of betrayal. "Your sister already paid the deposit," he said, his eyes twinkling with an idea. "So, technically, it's half paid for. But a cake like that, a piece of art like that, it deserves a much better story." He stood up, a new energy about him. He was no longer just an observer. He was becoming a co-conspirator. "I have a proposition for you," he said, extending a hand to help her up. "You designed it. Your vision is what makes it special. So you should be the one to finish it. But we're going to change it. We will unmake their celebration and create yours." He was offering her not just a reprieve, but a weapon. A way to fight back not with bitterness, but with beauty. He was inviting her into his world, the world of creation, and in doing so, he was giving her the tools to rebuild her own. Chloe followed Mr. Harrison back into the bakery. The bell chimed again, but this time it sounded different, not an announcement of a customer, but the starting bell of a new chapter. He led her past the pristine storefront and through a swinging door into the heart of his kingdom, the kitchen. It was a world of stainless steel, humming mixers, and towering racks of cooling pastries. The air was thick with the comforting, honest smells of work and creation. It was a sanctuary from the cruel deceptions of the world outside. He handed her a clean, white apron, and she tied it around her waist. The simple act felt transformative, like putting on a suit of armor. Her hands were still trembling slightly, but as she took in the organized chaos of the kitchen, a sense of purpose began to settle over her. This was a place where things were made, not broken. Where raw ingredients were combined with skill and care to create something wonderful. Mr. Harrison gestured to the three-tiered cake, which sat on a large turntable in the center of a steel table. It was beautiful, but seeing it now, she saw the ghost of the lie it was meant to represent. "The foundation is strong," Mr. Harrison said, tapping the base tier. "The recipe is sound. But the decoration, the story it tells, that is what we will change." He handed her a piping bag filled with pristine white buttercream. At first, her movements were hesitant. She was an amateur in a master's workshop. But Mr. Harrison guided her with quiet encouragement. "Don't be afraid. The frosting will know what you want it to do." As she worked, something miraculous happened. The tremor in her hands stilled. The rhythmic motion of piping the intricate bind pattern she had originally designed was meditative. The world narrowed to the tip of the piping bag and the smooth, cool surface of the cake. The pain, the anger, the betrayal, it all began to flow out of her, through her fingertips and into the art she was creating. Then, she had an idea. A bold, powerful one. "It needs something else," she said, her voice confident. "Not a bride and groom. Something stronger." She sketched her idea on a piece of parchment paper. A single, magnificent phoenix, its wings spread wide, rising from a nest of delicate, shimmering sugar flames at the base of the cake. It was a symbol of rebirth, of beauty emerging from ashes. Mr. Harrison looked at her drawing, his eyes widening in genuine astonishment. "My girl," he said, his voice filled with respect. "You are not just a person with an eye for design. You're an artist." A true 1 inch he saw her then, not as the victim he'd met on the bench, but as a colleague, a creator. He was no longer her savior. He was her mentor, her first true champion. Together, they would turn this symbol of a lie into a masterpiece of truth. The cake was finished. It was more than a cake, it was a sculpture, a statement. The phoenix, sculpted from shimmering, golden red sugar glass, seemed to radiate its own inner light. It was a testament not to a broken promise, but to an unbreakable spirit. As they worked, a strange sense of calm had settled over Chloe. She had discovered a part of herself she never knew existed, a talent that had been dormant, waiting for a crisis to awaken it. In the ashes of her old life, she had found a new source of strength. But her work wasn't done yet. A cake like this needed an audience. Through a quick, gut-wrenching call to a mutual friend who was horrified by the news, Chloe found out where the secret ceremony was taking place. A secluded corner of a public park, a place meant for quiet reflection, now co-opted for their deceitful union. It was to be a small, intimate affair with only a handful of friends who were in on the secret. Mr. Harrison helped her carefully load the magnificent creation into the back of her car, boxing it with the care of a museum curator handling a priceless artifact. As he closed the trunk, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Go show them what real strength looks like," he said, his voice firm. "Show them what it means to build something beautiful for yourself." Chloe drove across town, the cake sitting like a silent, powerful passenger in her back seat. She didn't feel nervous or vengeful. She felt clear. As she pulled into the park, she could see them from a distance. Isabella, radiant in a simple white dress that looked elegant and expensive. Liam, standing beside her in a suit, his posture stiff, his face a mask of discomfort. A small gathering of about a dozen people stood before them, watching a celebrant speak. Chloe didn't storm over. She didn't scream or cause a scene. That would have been their kind of drama. Hers was quieter and far more powerful. She found a picnic table in a more central, visible area of the park, a good 100 yards away from their clandestine wedding. With deliberate, calm movements, she unpacked the cake and placed it on the table. It stood there in the afternoon sun, a beacon of defiance and artistry. Beside it, she placed a simple, hand-lettered sign she had made back at the bakery. It didn't mention names. It didn't rage or accuse. It simply said, "For every heart that has been broken and refused to stay shattered. Today, we celebrate resilience." Free cake. The effect was immediate and magnetic. People strolling through the park, families with laughing children, young couples holding hands, solitary joggers, were drawn to the extraordinary sight. A 3-tiered masterpiece of a cake sitting on a public picnic table was unusual enough, but the sign was what truly captured their attention. The message resonated. A small crowd began to form. An elderly woman with kind eyes was the first to approach. "What a beautiful thought," she said softly, reading the sign. "And what a magnificent cake." Chloe smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Please," she said, gesturing with the cake knife Mr. Harrison had given her. "Have a slice." Soon a line had formed. Chloe cut slice after slice of the lemon and elderflower cake, the cake she was supposed to share with Liam, and handed it out to strangers. And as they ate, they talked. They shared their own stories. A young man spoke of a business partner who had cheated him. A mother talked about her child overcoming a serious illness. The elderly woman spoke of losing her husband of 50 years and finding the strength to go on. Chloe's small act of personal defiance had transformed into a spontaneous, public celebration of the human spirit's capacity to endure. From their secluded corner, the wedding party could not ignore the growing commotion. They saw the crowd, the laughter, the magnificent cake that was clearly meant for them being given away. Isabella's face, once beaming with triumphant love, twisted into a mask of pure fury. This was her day, her victory, and Chloe was stealing her spotlight, rewriting the ending of the story. She broke away from the ceremony and stomped across the grass, her white dress trailing behind her like a battle flag. What in the world do you think you're doing? She hissed, her voice low and venomous as she reached the table. You are ruining everything. Chloe looked up from the slice of cake she was handing to a little girl. She looked at her sister, at the rage and entitlement in her eyes, and felt not pain, but a strange, liberating pity. No, Isabella, Chloe said, her voice calm and steady, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. You and Liam tried to ruin everything. I'm just rebuilding. This cake was meant for a wedding built on lies. Now, it's celebrating truth. And, honestly, she added, taking a deep breath of the free air, I've never felt happier. Isabella stood there, sputtering, exposed and powerless in front of a crowd of strangers who were now looking at her with undisguised contempt. Liam, who had followed her, saw the whole scene. He saw the shame reflected in the eyes of the crowd, saw the quiet, unshakable power in Chloe, and saw the ugly truth of what he had done. Without a word, he turned and walked away from Isabella, away from the sham wedding, his head hung low, finally unable to stomach the lie. The afternoon sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the park. The last slice of cake was gone. Chloe was surrounded not by wedding guests, but by a small group of new acquaintances, strangers who had been united by a shared moment of grace and defiance. They had helped her pack up the table, sharing stories and laughter, their presence a comforting balm. She hadn't just given away cake, she had created a community, however fleeting. The ugly confrontation with her sister felt like a distant memory, a scene from someone else's life. Chloe had not only survived the detonation of her world, she had emerged from the rubble stronger, clearer, and holding a piece of her own reclaimed artistry in her hands. As she drove away from the park, she felt a profound sense of peace. The future that had been stolen from her no longer seemed like a loss. It felt like an escape. She had been freed from a gilded cage she hadn't even realized she was in. She had found her own voice, her own talent, and her own worth, all in the space of a single, tumultuous afternoon. A few days later, her phone rang. It was Mr. Harrison. He didn't ask about the drama or the fallout. He was a man focused on creation, not destruction. I've been thinking, he said, his voice direct. I'm getting older. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be for the fine detail work. But my business is growing. I need a partner. Not an employee, a partner. Someone with vision, with artistry. Someone who understands that what we sell isn't just cake, it's a story. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. It was an offer she never could have dreamed of, a validation that went far beyond a simple job. It was a recognition of the talent she had just discovered within herself. She had walked into his bakery as a victim, a footnote in her sister's story. She was now being invited to co-author a new one. The life she had lost was one where she was loved conditionally, where her worth was determined by others. The life that was now opening up before her was one she would build herself, with her own two hands. Chloe didn't get the wedding she had planned, a day celebrating a fragile, false love. Instead, she got a rebirth. She turned the ultimate symbol of her betrayal into the foundation of her new life, a monument to her own resilience. Sometimes, the most devastating heartbreaks are not endings. They are violent, necessary beginnings. They are the forest fires that clear out the dead wood to make space for new, vibrant growth. They shatter the life you thought you wanted, to make room for the life that has been waiting for you all along. Remember that your story is never truly over, even when a chapter ends in tears. And never, ever underestimate the power of a broken heart to build something beautiful.